Hello all and welcome back to my channel. My name is Pandey and today we are going to talk about user-driven Azure Ready Join Windows Autopilot. So in the last module, we talked about traditional versus modern ways to configure a device, what is Windows Autopilot, key technology used in Autopilot, Windows Autopilot benefits, hardware hash and device registration, and the way to register the device. In this module, we are going to talk about what is out-of-box experience and out-of-box experience phases and default flow, what is Windows Autopilot deployment service, then we will talk about user-driven Azure Ready Autopilot process flow, overall autopilot requirement, and then we'll discuss about configuration requirement and how to configure. In last, we will configure the settings in Azure and Intune portal and test it on virtual machine. Now let's first discuss and understand what is out-of-box experience. So out-of-box experience is the experience that an end user has when taking a product after unboxing, runs the installer and it's preparing for first time use. So when we are installing the operating system on a bare metal, then there are many phases also known as configuration passes. These configuration passes are the phases of a Windows installation during which we can customize an image, and these are the Windows PE offline servicing, generalized, specialized, audit system, audit user, and out-of-box experience system phases. Out-of-box experience is the last configuration passes in Windows installation during which end user or admin can customize an image. So traditionally device admins are using Windows System Image Manager, also known as WSIM, to create unattended.xml file, also known as answer file, for configuring the out-of-box experience pages. Through Windows Autopilot, admin is configuring the out-of-box experience phases remotely using Windows Autopilot deployment services. For configuring the out-of-box remotely, admin is creating Autopilot deployment profile similar to the answer file using GUI in Microsoft Endpoint Admin Center portal. We can also use Microsoft Store for Business to create these profiles. So to configure the out-of-box experience remotely, system needs internet access as well as a web app which can check the profile against Autopilot deployment services. Out-of-box experience page are a kind of web page or apps which are delivered via cloud services using cloud experience host.exe, which initiates internet access check. During out-of-box experience, system is temporarily creating a user called default user 0 account for configuration, and this account is having full admin access on the system. Now let's discuss about the default out-of-box experience flow. So this will help us to understand the difference between autopilot versus non-autopilot out-of-box experience windows. So when a user is configuring the system for the first time, they need to configure the out-of-box experience pages setting in a sequence. First, they need to select the language, then region, then they need to select the keyboard option. They can configure the secondary keyboard layout, and then cloud experience host.exe checks the internet access. If the user is using Ethernet, then he will not get Wi-Fi screen, else they will get Wi-Fi screen for internet access. Then machine is checking against the autopilot service to get the out-of-box experience configuration setting for configuration. If the machine is an autopilot system, then machine is downloading the autopilot configuration profile in JSON format. At the same time, machine is also checking and downloading any critical 0-day patch as well as driver updates. The user cannot opt out these critical updates as they are required for the device to operate properly. Windows will alert the user that the device is checking for and applying the updates. If required, machine will go for a reboot. When machine will be online, then user will get a end user experience license agreement, also known as EULA page, and then sign in to create a local or Microsoft account. If user is choosing the local account option instead of sign in with Microsoft, then they will get a next out of box experience pages. They will get create security questions for local account, configure window hello setup, then they will save the file in OneDrive, make Cortana my personal assistant, then they will get a privacy setting page, then OEM registration page, and then get the latest update, and then finally window appears at the end of out of box experience. Important point is that all device registered in Autopilot services will automatically skip Cortana, OneDrive and OEM registration setup page during the out of box experience window process. Let's talk about the Windows Autopilot deployment service. So we know that the Windows Autopilot is a collection of technologies like Autopilot Deployment Service, Azure Active Directory, Intune, Office 365 and many more, and used to set up and pre-configure new devices, getting them ready for productive use. So Windows Autopilot Deployment Service is managed and maintained by the Microsoft. Autopilot Deployment Service provides the backend database that associates hardware hash with customer tenant. When an OEM or CSP registered the device for a customer, they are writing the database or information to Microsoft Autopilot Deployment Service database and not directly to the customer tenant. When an OEM or CSP registered an Autopilot device, it is automatically creating an Azure AD object. The Autopilot deployment process needs this object to identify the device before the user sign in. When Windows machine is in out of box experience mode and have internet access, then machine will automatically check against Microsoft Autopilot Deployment Service database and download the deployment profile in JSON format if device information exists in the Autopilot database. Now we know what is out of the box experience and Autopilot deployment services and the standard out of box experience flow. Now let's see what is the out of box experience flow in case of user driven Azure AD joined Autopilot. So in case of user driven Azure AD joined Autopilot, user is going to initiate the Autopilot process. So once user is getting a device, they have to unbox the device, plug it in and turn it on. After that, once the user is on out of box experience window, they have to select the region, language and keyboard layout. Once this is done, user is need to connect a wireless or wired network with internet access. If they are using wireless, they need to connect the Wi-Fi for network. After that, device checks and downloads a window Autopilot deployment profile for out of box experience customization from the Windows Autopilot deployment services. This is the same profile which we already created in Intune and deployed on that object ID created in Azure. After that, window will also check if there is any critical or 0-day patches as well as driver update. If machine is able to find any such updates, they are going to download and install it, as well as at the same time machine is also going to rename the device if we already configure the naming convention is deployment profile. And then if required, machine is going for a reboot. After that, user will be prompted for Azure AD credentials, in which they need to provide the username and passwords. This customized user experience shows the Azure AD tenant name as well as logo and the sign in text. After this, the device is going to join in Azure Active Directory as well as enroll in Intune. This is because we already enable the MDM auto enrollment option all the users. Once this is done, machine is enrolled in Intune, then machine is user will see the enrollment status page which displays the device configuration page. This enrollment status page is moving from device preparation to device setup and then account setup. In device preparation phase, machine is securing the hardware, joining the device in the organization, and the register the device in MDM services. In device configuration phase, machine is applying the security policies, certificate profiles, network connection, and all the application we deployed on the device. In account phase, machine is going to apply the security policies, certificate profiles, network connections, and application which we deployed on the user. And after that, once the configuration is done, device is ready for the production use. Now let's discuss the autopilot requirement. So we already discussed in the previous module, but let's quickly check and see what all we need to perform an autopilot. So very first is the software requirement. So we need a Windows 10 or 11 operating system with supported edition. So currently Pro, Enterprise, and Educations are the supported version. With respect to network requirement, because Windows Autopilots depends on the variety of internet service, we need to ensure that all the services and their respective URLs is whitelisted and machine is able to reach all the URLs so that autopilot can be performed smoothly. With respect to licensing requirement, we need any of the license so that we can perform the autopilot. Most important point is that we need Azure Active Directory P1 or P2 license so that we can enable the automatic enrollment. Now coming to the configuration requirement, and in this module we're going to talk about and we'll see how we can configure these all requirements, like configuring Azure Active Directory enrollment, configure Azure Active Directory custom mentoring, and then allow users to join in Azure Active Directory, how we can register a device profile, how we can create a profile, how we can create ESP enrollment status page configuration, and then application deployment, and then last we'll create a dynamic group for autopilot. Now let's discuss a little bit more about the configuration requirement. So the very first configuration requirement is to configure the Azure Active Directory automatic enrollment. Or this is required when we want to enroll a device automatically in Intune. Let's say you are joining a device in Azure AD and you want to automatically enroll any Azure AD joined device in MDM solution, then we need to enable this option so that whenever any machine is going to join in Azure Active Directory, that machine is automatically enrolled in Intune. And that feature requires minimum Azure Active Directory Premium P1 or P2 license. So the next configuration requirement is to configure the custom branding page. This branding page will ensure user that they are connected to the right tenant when they are performing the autopilot, and they need to provide their username and password. At that time they will see whatever we are configuring in the custom branding page. The third requirement is to configure the Azure Active Directory join permission. So in an on-premises environment, if we want to join a device in on-premises domain, then we need a special account or we need to provide a permission to a special person who can enroll the device in on-premises AD. In the same way, if we want a user can enroll their device in Azure Active Directory, then we need to provide those permission to the user. So to providing those permission to the user, we need to go to the Azure Microsoft Azure portal, and under all device settings we need to enable this option. User may join the device in Azure Active Directory. We can allow all the user to join their device in Azure Active Directory, or we can create a group, and then on that group whatever users we are adding on those groups, they are allowed to join their device in Azure Active Directory. This is very important because when we are performing user driven has already joined Autopilot, and in that case user first join in the Azure Active Directory, and if that option is not enabled or user is not allowed, we cannot perform the Autopilot on that case. Now the fourth configuration requirement is to register a device in Autopilot services. So whenever we are purchasing a new device, OEMs or cloud service providers is going to upload the hardware hash or going to register a device in Autopilot deployment services on our behalf. We as an admin can also upload the hardware hash using Intune portal. What we need to do, we need to extract the hardware hash by running some commands, and then we need to import the hardware hash in Windows Autopilot deployment services. So once we are importing those hardware hash in these hardware hash going to sync with Autopilot deployment services, and there will be a object ID created in Azure Active Directory, and we can deploy the deployment. We can assign the deployment profile and ESP on those object IDs. The fifth requirement is to configure the deployment profiles. Okay, so based on the requirement, we can create a hybrid Azure Ready Join deployment profile or Azure Ready Join deployment profile. So we will see that in when we are going to create this. But for creating these deployment profiles, we have to log into the Microsoft Intune portal, and from there we can go to the deployment profiles, and then we can create a deployment profile based on the requirement. The next requirement is to configure the enrollment status page. This is very important. When we are performing the Autopilot, we can track the Autopilot deployment status with the help of enrollment status page. So to configure this enrollment status page, we have to go to the admin center portal, and then we can create a enrollment status page. We'll see how we can create enrollment status page. Now the next requirement, it's not mandatory to deploy an application, but most of the organization wants to deploy application because they want to provide some standard application or a global application during Autopilot process. So the next configuration requirement is to create a dynamic group for Autopilot. So we need this dynamic group so that whatever we want to deploy during Autopilot, we can target all those deployments, applications, ESPs, and whatever we want to configure on the device, we need to target on this group. So this group should be a dynamic group, so that whenever there is a new machine added in the Autopilot services, machine is going to add automatically in this group. We'll see how we can create this group. We can create this group either in Azure portal or Intune portal also. Let's see how we can configure the required configuration in Azure as well as in Intune portal to perform Autopilot. So right now I am on my client machine. Let's start configuring the required configuration related to Azure Active Directory. So I am going to open Azure Active Directory portal. For that, I am going to open Microsoft Azure portal. And the very first configuration is to configure the automatic enrollment. So to configure an automatic enrollment, we have to go to Azure Active Directory, and then we have to go to Mobility MDM and MM section, and under this section we already have a Microsoft Intune, and we need to ensure that this MDM user scope is set to all. In case if we want to use a sum option, that we need to ensure that all the required user is added in that group, so that when they are going to perform an Autopilot, machine is joined to Azure Active Directory and then automatically enroll in Intune. So for us, that configuration is already configured. That's okay. Okay, before moving to the next configuration, I want to show you that, let's say right now we are doing a Autopilot with Microsoft Intune. In case we want to perform Autopilot with some other additional MDM solution, for that what we need to do, we need to add that additional MDM solution connector. Let's say we want to perform an Autopilot with AirWatch by VMware, then we need to add this connector. Once this is added, going to add this. Once this is added, we need to configure the same setting in that connector as well. It's now adding application AirWatch by VMware in Microsoft Azure portal so that we can enable automatic enrollment. Now it's added. Let me refresh it. Yeah, now AirWatch by VMware is added. If you want to enable MDM enrollment for that, then we again the same setting, we have to go to the MDM user scope and we need to select either all or some based on our requirement. And at any point of time, if you want to delete that application or connector, we just need to click on delete. Okay, same way we can add multiple applications. Right now we have IBM Mars 360 and then manage engine, and then there are mobile R and there are many Samsung kiosks. So based on the requirement, you can add the required application and you can enable the automatic enrollment for that MDM solution. Okay. For now we are focusing on Microsoft Intune. Okay, the first requirement to configure the Azure Active Directory automatic enrollment is now configured. Okay, the second requirement, let me go back to the home page again. The second requirement is to configure the company branding page, custom branding page or company branding page. Again, to go to the custom or company branding page, we have to go to the Azure Active Directory and then we have to go to company branding page and we have to configure it. Here we can configure background page as well as banner, logo. Okay, so let me configure the logo. I think I have logo in my deck. Okay, let me see if it is okay. It's saying that must be between 1 to 10,000 bytes. Okay, let me change this paint. I'm going to open paint and then file, open desktop, logo, this, and then resize it. I'm going to resize it to 10 and then okay, and then file and then save as, and then I'm going to save as new CMP logo. Okay, now let me try again adding this new one. Okay, now it's added. Okay, now if you want to add the user hint, okay, I'm going to enter your company email ID. Okay, and in the sign in page text, I'm going to add welcome to Chander money Pandey Intune demo lab. Okay, we can add additional settings, but for now that's okay. And I'm going to save it. If you want, you can add the default background. Okay, so for now I'm not going to configure it. That's it. Okay. And then one more point, under properties, whatever name is showing in the tenant property, right, that name is visible when user is logging at the very first time. Okay, welcome to, in my case, user will see welcome to Chandramani Pandey. Okay, so if you want to change it with the appropriate name, you can change it. Otherwise, most of the organization is already using their company name, so that's okay for now. To go in, good to know information. Okay, now that is also done. So second configuration, uh, configuring the company branding is now done. Now third one is to enable user to join the device in Azure Active Directory. Okay, again for that we have to go to Azure Active Directory page, blade, and then we have to go to the device section. Under device section, device setting. In device setting, we need to ensure that this option is selected to either all or selected. Okay, if it is selected to selected option, then person or the user who is a part of that selected option group is only able to enroll their device or join their device in Azure Active Directory. So user, okay, so for now I'm going to use all. Based on the your requirement, you can either use all or selected. Okay, if you want to use selected, then you need to select the members. Okay, you can add groups or member. For now I'm going to use select only. Okay, and that is also done. The third requirement to allow Azure Active Directory join permission is also done. Now all the configuration related to Azure Active Directory side is now configured. Now let's see what all we need to configure in Intune portal. So to configure the settings in Intune portal, I'm going to log in Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Admin Center portal. And the very first configuration is to create a deployment profile. To create a deployment profile, we have to go to the device enrollment section. Under Windows enrollment, we have a option called deployment profile. We have to create a deployment profile. So I'm going to create a deployment profile. We have a two option. We can create a deployment profile for Windows PC or for HoloLens. For now, I'm going to create for Windows PC, and then we need to give a name. So I'm going to give Win a Win 10, and then AD deployment profile. And if you want, you can give a description name also. Now second option is to convert all target devices to autopilot. So consider a scenario that you have 1,000 devices in your infrastructure where the device is not registered in autopilot services. So then in that case, we have two options. Either we can extract the hardware hash and then upload the hardware hash in autopilot services. The second option is to use this option, convert all target devices to autopilot and set it to yes. So what will happen when you are creating this deployment profile with setting yes, then machine is going to automatically register in autopilot services, and whenever user is performing the autopilot on those PCs, they will get the deployment profile. So for now, I'm not going to select this option to yes, leave it as a no. Now moving to the next page. In this page, we have to configure the out-of-box experience. So where the very first option is to configure the deployment mode. So we have two deployment modes, user-driven and self-deploying mode. So for now, I'm going to select user-driven mode. Then we have to configure the joined to Azure Active Directory as Azure Active Directory joined or hybrid Azure Active joined. So for now, we are going to select Azure Active Directory joined. Then the few options are by default disabled or hide by the Microsoft, like Microsoft software license terms, privacy setting, and hide change account options. Then user will not see these three pages while performing the autopilot. Then we have a next option is to configure the user account. By default, a person who is going to perform the autopilot is a standard user on the device, but if you want to make that user as the admin on the device, you can configure this setting. For now, I'm going to configure for testing purpose. And then you have an option to allow pre-provision device, that is set to no. We'll discuss this in upcoming module. Then we have a option called to select the language. By default is set to the operating system default. If you want, if you know that you have a single language OS, then you can select as per your preference. Okay, or you can allow user to select, but for now I'm going to select by default system language. And then you can enable the automatic keyboard configuration, so it is set to yes. And then device naming template, meaning that if you want to change the device name as per the standard, I mean, then you can configure some standard device naming. So we have two options: either we can use a random number or we can use a serial number. So for now I'm going to use a random number, so my device prefix name will be demo and then random number 6. So whenever user is performing the autopilot, machine name will be like demo and then 6 random numbers. Okay, it's saying that space. Okay, now next is you have to select the include group where you want to deploy this profile. If you want, if you have a multiple deployment profile, you can select multiple groups, but for now, for testing purpose, I am selecting all devices and targeted to all the devices, and the next deployment profile is ready and we need to create it. Now deployment profile is created and it is yet not showing yes. It takes some time to show yes, so we'll just refresh it. Now it's showing yes. Now the next configuration is to configure the enrollment status page, and for that I am going again to the same location, device enrollment, under device enrollment, enroll devices, and then Windows enrollment, and then we have an option called enrollment status page. So by default enrollment status page is already there and it is targeted to all devices and all users. So if you want, you can customize the default one or you can create a new one. For now I'm going to create a new one, so I'm going to give a new name, new one, sorry, new ESP, and then so it's saying that enrollment status page appears during initial device setup and during the first user sign in if enabled. So I'm going to enable it so that user can see all the profiles and app configuration progress. So this section is talking about if there is any issue with the installation, after how many minutes user will get a other notification. For now it's 60 minutes by default, but you can change as per your requirement. And we can customize the error message also. Then if you want, we can allow user to collect the logs. It is by default enable, and only show pages to the device provision by out of box experience. Yes, we want this ESP to show only if the machine is out of box experience window. So the next option is to block device user use until all apps and profiles are installed. So this is very important if you want to ensure that user can only log in once they have all the required applications and configuration settings applied on the device. If you want, you can, if it is by default enable, but if you want, you can close it. If you are doing this, then you will not able to get the customize or further customization option. So for now I'm going to select yes, and then you can allow user to reset device if installation occur. Yes, I want user can enable reset their device, and then allow users to use device if installation occur fail. Let's say if you deployed 10 application and out of 10, 9 application got successfully installed and one it's failed, then also user can use their device. So if you want that, you can allow it. And the next option is to block device use until required apps are installed if they are assigned to the user or device. So if you want to install all the application, then you can select it. Otherwise you have a option to select some application, and then once those applications install, user can log in, and the rest of the application will install automatically once the user logged in. So let's say I want to install, I have some, so I want to install Google Chrome, and then VLC, and then select. So these two applications are mandatorily installed. When these two applications are installed, rest of the application will be installed after user login. And then click next, and then you can assign this to a specific group or all user or device. For now I'm going to deploy to the all devices, and then click next. I don't want to create a scope tag, and then review it. Just ensure that all the settings are properly configured, and then create. Now ESP files are also created. So one more important point, let's say you have a multiple enrollment status page, so you can set the priority also. So to do that, you need to drag it, and then it will automatically change their priority. Let me show you. I am going to create a new DC test just for testing purpose. I'm not going to configure anything. I just want to show you how to change the priority. Now I have it to enrollment status page. I want new ESP priority should be 2, and this DC test priority should be 1. So what you need to do, you just need to drag it, and it's automatically going to change. Now new ESP enrollment status page priority is 2, and this the very first is this one. So this is very useful when you have multiple ESPs and machine is part of, or a user is a part of multiple ESPs. Now the next configuration requirement is to register a device in Autopilot service. So by default, when we are purchasing a device, the OEM or cloud service provider is by default registering the device in Autopilot service. But if we want to enable, or if we want to register device manually, let's see how we can enable it. So for that, we need to log into the device with and open a PowerShell, or I'm going to open PowerShell ISC, but you can use PowerShell also. Important point is that we need admin rights to perform this or to run these PowerShell commands. Meanwhile, PowerShell ISC is opening. I'm going to open Microsoft documentation, and there is some PowerShell commands already provided by Microsoft. Let's see. Okay, PowerShell. Yeah, this is a PowerShell command we need to run, and I'm just copying there and just okay. So this PowerShell command is going to create a folder in C drive with the name HWID, and then set the location to WID, and then execution policy and bypass, or if you want, you can scope for process also. Now it's going to install a get Windows Autopilot information module, and then going to extract the hardware hash. So I'm going to run it. Now hardware hash is extracted. Okay, now what we need to do, we need to upload this hardware hash. What we can do, we need to again need to go to the same location under device enrollment, then bottom, and then devices, and then we need to import it. Okay, and we need to select it, and then on the C drive, WID hardware hash, and this. Now I'm going to import the hardware hash. Now this is importing the device hardware hash, and now this is synchronizing the hardware hash with Autopilot services. Once this is done, we'll see the hardware hash with serial number and all under here. Now the hardware hash is uploaded, and it's visible in Autopilot device section. Now the next configuration requirement is to configure the dynamic group. So this is useful. So whenever we are registering any device for Autopilot, that device is or the hardware hash is automatically part of the dynamic group, and we can target all the required policies, application, and configurations. So to create the group, we need to go to the groups, and then create a new group, and then we need to create a security group, and then Autopilot group. If you want, you can provide the description also, and then member type you can assign that manually, or you can create a dynamic also. For dynamic query, we have to add a dynamic query. Okay, for dynamic query, let's see again, same location, autopilot dynamic membership query, and then create a device group. So we have to create a device group. For that, what we need to do, we can create a device group based on the ZTD ID. ZTD ID is basically a zero touch deployment ID. And if you want, we can create a group based on the specific order ID, or even with the specific purchase order ID. Okay, for now I'm going to create with the help for ZTID. I'm going to paste the query in OK, and then save it and create. Now group is created and populating under all groups. Let's see if the machine is automatically added in this group. For that, we need to check the members, and yes, we can see that machine is automatically added in this group. Now the all configuration requirement related to autopilot is in place. So let's rewind one more time. We already configured automatic enrollment, and then configure the company branding page, then enable the join the device to Azure Active Directory. Then in Intune portal, we created a deployment profile and assigned to all devices. Then we enroll a device in autopilot service by manually importing the hardware hash. We created an enrollment status page and assigned to all devices. And then we created a dynamic group, and if you want to deploy any specific application or configuration profile, you can target all those to the dynamic group. Let's now spin a virtual machine and perform an autopilot, see the things in real time. Now I am on my test PC, and I'm going to start performing autopilot test. But before that, let's see the some of the information which we can pull from the device at this point of time. So let me press Shift plus F10 to open the command prompt. The very first thing I'm going to show you is the host name. The host name is starts with desktop. Then I'm going to show you who am I. So as I already discussed in the theoretical part, that the during out of box experience, the user is default user 0, and we are able to see that the same thing here. I'm going to run winver. This will help you to understand whether we are running autopilot on a supported version or not. So I'm running autopilot on Windows 20 S2, which is the supported version, and it's a pro. So pro is also supported, version addition is also supported, and version is also supported. Now let's see system info. Now we can see that in system info we have 6 hotfix installed. So we already discussed that when machine is going to check against the autopilot service for deployment profile, at the same time it's going to check if there is any 0-day patch or any driver update. So it will, if there is any patch or anything, then machine is going to download and install. So right now we know that we have a 6 hotfix installed on the device, and let me open one more thing. I'm going to open task mgr.exe. Now let's see, we already discussed about that cloud experience host.procer exe is running with system context, and this exe is going to check whether the user is having internet connection or not. If user is not on hardwire, then this exe is forcing user to provide their Wi-Fi credential as password in Wi-Fi window. Okay, now we already check everything. Now I am going to select required options under region. Okay, now I'm going to select my keyboard layout, and I'm not going to select my secondary keyboard layout. And now machine is going to check at this point. Machine is going to check against the deployment autopilot deployment service whether this machine is on autopilot machine or not. At the same time, is also checking for 0-day patch and a driver update. Now it's saying that please do not turn off your device, because they are able to find some 0-day patch, I think, and deployment profile as well. Now it's saying your computer will be restarted before you continue. Okay. Now my machine is back, and now I can see the custom bending whichever we configured in Azure portal. Okay. Now let's see whether the machine name is changed or not. So I'm going to open command prompt and just typing host name. Now we can see that the host name is now changed. Earlier it was desktop something, and now it's saying the demo and the randomly 6 number. And now let's see if at this point of time machine is joined to domain or not. For that we need to press window and U, and then we can check whether the account is there or not. Okay, it's not there. Okay, now, and other thing we need to check is whether there is any hotfix installed on this machine or not. So for that I'm going to run system info. Yeah, we can see that earlier before rebooting the system we had six hotfixes. Now we have 7 hotfixes installed. Now I am going to type my username. And the password. Now machine is going, at this point of time machine is going to join in Azure Active Directory, and then because we already enable the automatic enrollment, machine is automatically enrolling in Intune. Now it's checking for more updates. Now we can see the enrollment status page. In the very first phase, machine is the device preparation phase, where machine is securing the hardware hash, joining the organization network, and registering your device in management solution. Okay. Now machine registered in your management solution is completed. Now the device preparation phase is completed. Now machine is configuring the device setup phase. Now we can see that we added 2 application in enrollment status page, and it's showing 1 out of 2 is installed. At this time, at any moment we want to open a command prompt, we just need to press shift plus F10 and we can open a command prompt, and we can see that what all application installed. I'm going to type appwich.cpl and it's going to open the now we can see that Google Chrome is installed and VLC player is also installed. These 2 applications we added in enrollment status page, and it's now showing completed also. Now machine is moving from device setup to user account setup phase. Now I'm going to log in with my Azure Active Directory credential. Now we can see that now whatever application we deployed on user base now is showing the enrollment status phase related to user setup, and because we have not deployed anything on user, that's why its phase is completed immediately, because we have not configured or disabled the Windows Hello for Business. It's asking me to configure the Windows Hello for Business. For now, I am not going to configure anything. I'm going to skip for now. And now I am able to log in with. Now, let's see if machine is enrolled in MDM solution or not. For that, again, we have to go to the same location, which is access work and school. And yes, now machine is enrolled in MDM solution. We can check the and our application, we whatever we deployed, okay, Google Chrome and VLC player is we deployed via enrollment setup is installed, and by default whenever we're deploying anything, management extension is automatically installed. Now user can use this PC for their productive work. I hope this is an informative video for you. Thank you very much for watching this video.